My aunt once looked me in the eyes and said, "This house should have been mine." I thought she was joking until the day she tried to steal it from me. Before I dive into how everything happened, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and tell me where you're listening from. It means a lot, and your support keeps stories like mine alive. My name is Sandra, I'm 30 years old, and for as long as I can remember, SR equals family home has been my anchor. It's not a mansion or some glamorous estate, it's an old, sturdy 2-story house with creaky floors and windows that whistle when the wind blows. My parents worked their entire lives to keep it, and when they passed away it became mine. Not because I demanded it, but because I was the only one who actually cared for it. But my aunt? She saw things differently. My Aunt Clara was my father's older sister. She carried herself like the matriarch of the family, always talking about tradition and family rights. But really, she just wanted control. When my parents passed, Clara wasted no time making comments like, "Well, as the eldest, I should be the one to keep the family home safe." Safe? She hadn't visited that house in years. She never fixed a leaky pipe or paid a cent of property tax. Yet she acted like my parents had made a mistake leaving it to me. At first, I brushed it off. I figured it was jealousy talking, or maybe she was grieving in her own strange way. But her words grew sharper each time we spoke. "You're too young to manage a house like that," she'd say. "Wouldn't it be easier if I took it off your hands?" I wanted to laugh. Too young? I was 30. I had been working full-time since my early 20s. I was the one patching the roof, mowing the lawn, paying the bills. Clara, meanwhile, lived in a rented condo and changed jobs more often than I changed my hairstyle. But she didn't stop. Soon, it wasn't just sly comments, it was gossip. Family gatherings became minefields. Cousins would whisper, "I heard Clara say you don't even pay the taxes." Or, "Clara told me you're planning to sell the house behind everyone's back." None of it was true, but it spread like wildfire. It hurt. This was my family. People who had watched me grow up now looked at me with suspicion. And every time I tried to defend myself, Clara would act innocent. "Oh Sandra, don't be so dramatic," she'd say, flashing that fake smile. "I just worry about you. A house is such a big responsibility." But her mask slipped one evening. I had invited her over for coffee, trying to smooth things out. She walked through the front door, glanced around the living room, and said flatly, "You know, this house was supposed to be mine. Everyone knows it." I blinked, unsure if I had heard her right. "Supposed to be yours. Aunt Clara, Mom and Dad left it to me." She set her purse down, folded her arms, and leaned against the wall like she owned the place. "They made a mistake. You were their little girl, so of course they wanted to take care of you. But a house like this is family property. And in this family, I'm the eldest. Which means it's rightfully mine." I laughed nervously, waiting for her to grin and say she was kidding. But her face stayed stone-cold serious. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just jealous. She genuinely believed she was entitled to my home. After that, the tension between us grew unbearable. She'd drop by uninvited, walking through the rooms like she was inspecting her future prize. She'd point out cracks in the wall or the peeling paint and say things like, "See, this is why I should be the one managing it." I started feeling paranoid, like every move I made was under her watchful eye. I changed the locks, stopped answering her calls, and tried to create distance. But that only seemed to fuel her obsession. She became bolder. One afternoon I got a call from a neighbor. "Sandra, your aunt's here with some men, and they're measuring the property line. Is everything okay?" My stomach dropped. Measuring the property? What was she planning? I rushed home, but by the time I arrived, she was gone. All that remained were chalk markings near the fence. When I called her to demand an explanation, she just laughed. "Oh, don't be so jumpy," she said. "I'm just making sure everything is in order. After all, one day this place will be mine." Her words made my blood run cold. I wanted to scream, but instead, I hung up and locked every door and window. I told myself she was bluffing, that she couldn't actually take what was legally mine. But a small part of me couldn't shake the fear. Clara wasn't just talk, she was manipulative, cunning, and willing to twist the truth until people believed her lies. And then it happened. One Friday evening, I came home from work exhausted, juggling groceries in my arms. I reached for my keys, slipped them into the lock, and they didn't turn. Confused, I tried again. Nothing. I jiggled the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. My stomach sank as I pulled back and realized what had happened. The locks had been changed. My heart pounded in my chest. This was my home, my parents' home. and someone had locked me out. But deep down, I already knew who. It was Clara. And in that moment, as I stood on my own porch with groceries spilling from my arms and tears stinging my eyes, I realized my aunt's obsession wasn't just talk anymore. She was ready to take everything from me. Standing there on my porch, clutching the bag of groceries to my chest, I couldn't believe it. My own house, the house my parents had built, the house where I had spent every Christmas, every birthday, every tearful night was locked against me. I tried the back door, the side door, even the basement hatch. All sealed tight. And as I circled the property, panic rising in my chest, I saw a freshly taped piece of paper on the front door. It read "Property of Clara James. No trespassing." I nearly dropped the groceries. Clara had not only changed the locks, she had posted a notice claiming ownership. The next morning, I marched straight to her condo. She opened the door in her robe, sipping coffee like she had been expecting me. "Clara," I snapped, shoving the paper at her, "what is this? You changed my locks." She didn't even flinch. She sipped her coffee and said, "Correction, Sandra, I changed my locks. You should be thanking me. I'm protecting the property now." I stared at her in disbelief. "Your locks? This is my house. Legally, it's mine." She gave me a smug little smile. "Not according to the papers I filed." That was the first time I realized just how far she was willing to go. Clara had forged documents, fake rental agreements, tax receipts, even a lease claiming I was just a tenant overstaying my welcome. And she had filed them with the county office, trying to rewrite history. I spent days bouncing between government buildings, trying to prove her claims were fake. Each time, clerks would look at me with pity and say, "Well, she has papers. You'll have to dispute them in court." Court. The word made my stomach churn. I had never set foot in a courtroom in my life. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let Clara take what was mine. So I started gathering evidence. I dug through every dusty box in the attic, every old drawer in the kitchen, pulling out receipts, tax documents, utility bills, all with my name on them. Years of proof that I had maintained and paid for the house, not Clara. But the real breakthrough came from a friend. My neighbor, Mr. Harris, was a retired carpenter who had lived next door since before I was born. When I told him what was happening, he shook his head and said, "Sandra, that woman's been bragging about this for months. You might want to hear what I recorded." He pulled out his old phone and played back a voice memo. Clara's voice filled the air. "That house will be mine. Sandra doesn't deserve it. I've already got the papers ready, and no one will believe her once they see them." My hands trembled as I listened. It was exactly what I needed: proof of her scheme straight from her own mouth. But Clara wasn't done yet. When the court date arrived, I walked into the building clutching my folder of documents, my heart hammering in my chest. I expected Clara to be nervous, maybe even desperate. But when she entered, she was glowing with confidence. She wore her best suit, her hair perfectly styled, and beside her was someone I didn't expect: my cousin Lila. Lila, who had grown up with me, who had spent countless nights in that house during her childhood. She was standing at Clara's side like an ally. I couldn't believe it. "Lila, what are you doing here?" I asked. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Sandra, I'm sorry, but Aunt Clara's right. That house belongs in the family, and she's the eldest. You've been selfish." Selfish. The word stung like a slap. Selfish for protecting the home I had poured my soul into, while Clara never so much as lifted a finger. Clara smirked, enjoying every second of my shock. "See, Sandra? Even your own cousin knows I'm right. You should have just handed the house over peacefully. Now it's too late." The judge entered and the hearing began. Clara strutted to the stand, laying out her forged documents with a flourish. She spoke with rehearsed authority, spinning a tale of how she had been promised the house, how I had stayed illegally, how she had simply stepped in to protect family property. The judge nodded politely, taking notes. And for a terrifying moment, I thought he believed her. When it was my turn, my hands shook as I placed my folder on the table. I laid out my receipts, my utility bills, the tax statements, all in my name. But I could see Clara smirking, confident that her forged papers looked more convincing than my truth. So I pulled out my final weapon. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steadier now, "I also have an audio recording. Would you please listen?" The clerk pressed play and Clara's voice echoed through the courtroom. "That house will be mine. Sandra doesn't deserve it. I've already got the papers ready, and no one will believe her once they see them." Gasps rippled through the room. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Clara's face drained of color, her smug smile collapsing into horror. I turned to look at her, meeting her eyes for the first time that day. For once, she had no words. But the case wasn't over yet. Clara's lawyer scrambled, claiming the recording was fake, that my documents were doctored, that I was lying. The judge frowned, clearly unconvinced but unwilling to make a ruling without more evidence. He leaned forward and said, "We will need to review financial records and property histories in full. Until then, the case remains open." Clara exhaled, a tiny smirk returning to her lips. She wasn't finished. And neither was I. As I walked out of that courtroom, my knees shaking, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Clara wasn't going to stop. She had dragged Lila into this, twisted the truth, and nearly turned the judge against me. But she had no idea that her own house of cards was about to collapse. Because what she didn't know and what I had just discovered was that Clara wasn't as stable as she pretended to be. She had debts, mortgages, and a financial storm brewing behind her perfect facade. And soon, the very house she was fighting to steal from me would be the last roof she'd see before karma took everything away. When I left the courtroom that day, my hands were still trembling, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Clara thought she had won a round by dragging the case out, but what she didn't know was that she had just given me more time. More time to uncover the secrets she had been hiding. I spent nights digging through every public record I could find, scrolling through databases, and asking friends for advice. That's when I stumbled on a notice buried deep in the county archives. Clara's condo wasn't even hers. She had been living on borrowed time, months behind on her rent, and drowning in unpaid loans. The realization hit me like lightning. She wasn't fighting for my house because she loved it or wanted to protect family property. She was fighting for it because she was desperate. She had nowhere else to go. Armed with this knowledge, I walked into the second court hearing calmer than before. Clara strutted in wearing another expensive suit she could barely afford, flashing smiles like she owned the room. Lila followed her closely, still avoiding my gaze. But this time, I wasn't intimidated. The judge called us forward. Clara launched into another dramatic speech about tradition, about her rights as the eldest. She waved her papers in the air like they were gospel. The performance would have been convincing to anyone who didn't know the truth. When it was my turn, I kept my voice steady. "Your Honor," I said, sliding a folder onto the desk, "I've provided the full financial history of the property, all taxes and utilities paid directly under my name. But I've also submitted evidence of Ms. Clara James's financial records, showing unpaid loans, eviction notices, and falsified claims connected to this case." The courtroom fell silent. The judge flipped through the folder, his expression hardening with each page. Clara's lawyer leaned over, whispering frantically, but Clara's face went pale. Her composure cracked, her hand trembling as she tried to snatch the papers away. "That's irrelevant," she shouted. "My finances have nothing to do with this case." But the judge shook his head. "On the contrary, Ms. James, your financial state shows motive. And combined with the forged documents, it paints a very clear picture of fraud and attempted property theft." Clara's mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Then came the final blow. The judge turned to me. "Sandra, based on the evidence provided, it is clear that you are the legal and rightful owner of the property. Case closed in your favor." I exhaled so hard it felt like I'd been holding my breath for weeks. The gavel struck, sealing Clara's defeat. But karma wasn't done with her yet. Within days, Clara's carefully built facade crumbled. Word spread quickly in the family about her forgery, her lies, and her debts. Cousins who once believed her lies now avoided her. Lila finally admitted that Clara had pressured her into testifying, threatening to cut her off if she didn't. The guilt on Lila's face when she confessed was heavy, but I couldn't bring myself to be angry. Clara had manipulated her, just like she tried to manipulate me. Then the news came. Clara's landlord had finally evicted her. She hadn't paid rent in months, and with no savings and no house to steal, she was forced to pack up her life into boxes. I'll never forget the day I saw her on the street, her car loaded with bags, her eyes wild with desperation. She spotted me across the road and froze. For a split second, I thought she might come over and beg for help. But she didn't. She turned away, her shoulders slumped, walking into a future she had created for herself. Homeless, disgraced, and alone. And me? I went back to my house. My parents' house. I stood in the living room, running my hand along the old banister, breathing in the familiar scent of wood and home. For the first time in months, I felt safe again. This wasn't just about property. It was about standing up for myself when someone tried to strip me of everything I had left. It was about realizing that blood doesn't excuse betrayal. I never wanted to destroy my aunt. I never wanted her to suffer. But when she tried to take the one thing I cherished most, karma stepped in and gave her exactly what she deserved. Now, every time I walk through my front door, I remember the battle it took to keep it. And every time I sit on the porch, sipping coffee in the morning sun, I know this house isn't just a building. It's a symbol of resilience, of truth prevailing over lies, and of how karma always finds its way. Clara once told me this house would be hers. Now she doesn't have a house at all. That's the thing about greed, it consumes you until you're left with nothing. So if you've ever had someone try to take what's yours, remember this: you don't need to stoop to their level. Just stand firm, gather your truth, and let karma do the rest. Because in the end, the sweetest revenge isn't about shouting or fighting, it's about living well while the ones who tried to break you collapse under the weight of their own lies. And that's exactly what happened to my aunt. She tried to steal my house, but instead, she lost her own. Now tell me, have you ever had a family member betray you for greed? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of betrayal, resilience, and the sweetest revenge.